What's up, guys? Welcome back to FishOfHex. My name is Travis. Today we're going to be feeding the 300-gallon reef some live foods as well as adding some biodiversity to that system. Now, when it comes to the 125, if you guys have been following me for a while, you know that I used to do the same type of dosing on that system with a baby brine shrimp, pods, phytoplankton, all sorts of stuff. I used to do that, and that tank was quite successful, so we tend to continue on with things that we were successful with in previous systems to our newer tanks. So that's exactly what we're going to talk about and do in this video. Now, when it comes to a particular brand, I like to go with mikesphyto.com, and I've actually met Mike at several frag swaps here locally, the Williamsport one, the Lancaster frag swaps. He's a great guy. He sells a ton of this stuff, and as you guys can see, it's of quality. Everything is alive, moving, and he does ship throughout the United States, and I'll talk more about that here in a little while. But I definitely like to go with him, not only for the convenience if I just get to drive there and pick it up, but I actually get to see the operation. I get to see kind of how he puts this stuff together, and it's of quality. So of course we're all about adding the best that we can to our reef tanks, and it just works out great that this guy lives so close to me. Now, when it comes to dosing and kind of how I approach that, there's a couple things that I always recommend for people who dose live foods and also dose phytoplankton. The first thing you want to do is you want to dose this stuff at night. So when the lights are off, about 30 minutes in, kind of when the fish have calmed down a little bit, you want to go ahead and dose the brine shrimp, the live foods, the pods, all that kind of stuff. You want to dose that in the main display as well as in your sump slash refugium. Now, if you don't have a refugium, I wouldn't bother throwing it in your sump. Just go ahead and put it all in the main display. But if you do have a refugium, this is a great place to add this biodiversity so they can continue to reproduce. They'll be able to get into the main display at some point, either become food or help with the detritus removal within the main tank. Now, I also like to dose the phytoplankton with this live food, like the baby brine shrimp, the rotifers. I like to mix the phytoplankton, and there are two different types that I've used before. The standard, which is 1 milliliter per 5 gallons, and then there's the premium, which is more of a concentrated phytoplankton, and I like to dose that 1 milliliter per 15 gallons, and I just mix it with the rotifers and the live baby brine shrimp to give them a food source, and of course to take care of the coral. Now, the next thing I recommend you do when feeding live foods, in particular phytoplankton, is to go ahead and turn off your protein skimmer prior to doing so. Now, the reason I do this is I just don't want to take any chance of it being pulled out of the skimmer, maybe overflowing it. Now, when it came to the Curve 7 on the 125, I never had an issue with it overflowing. There was never any problems with that. But the first time I dosed on the 300 with the Nios Quantum 300, that protein skimmer just pulls out everything, and I did get a ton of extra skimmate, which could have been avoided simply by just turning it off. So keep that in mind. Definitely turn off your skimmer if you're not sure how it's going to react when feeding these types of foods. Now, I briefly want to touch base on a question that I get quite often, and that is, when can I add a Mandarin Goby, and how do I go about getting ready for one? And I've always replied to people with the same answers: hey, you should wait at least 6 months to a year, and make sure you have cocopods and amphipods that were introduced via either macroalgae or dosed just like this. Now, one way to increase that population, of course, is seeding the tank just like this. Is go ahead and get the product early on and set it up. Dose it consistently and build up that pod population. That way, when you add your Mandarin Goby, it will have plenty of food and it won't starve to death. Now, some of them do survive on live foods or brine shrimp or even frozen foods, but getting a Mandarin Goby to eat that kind of stuff is definitely tricky, and it's something you're going to have to try to do while it's in quarantine just to ensure that you can see it actually eating. Now, if you do decide to dose this stuff early on, like 2 or 3 months into the tank's lifespan, I would still wait at least 2 or 3 more months before adding the Mandarin, because you really want to make sure that it has the proper food, because there's nothing worse than watching a Mandarin Goby starve to death because you didn't prepare ahead of time for that fish. Now, to answer the question that's about to go in the comment section, do I plan on adding a Mandarin Goby to the 300? Yes, I will be adding a couple of them here within the next few months, so just stay tuned for that. I am pretty excited. It is one of my favorite fish, and now that Reggie is no longer in the tank because he sadly passed away, I can actually get away with these smaller fish and not worry about him gobbling them up. Now, moving back to dosing, when it comes to the live foods, I always dose the entire bottle at one time. When it comes into the mail or when I pick it up that day, I dose the entire thing that night. It's just, I like to get all the stuff into the tank. I don't want it sitting in the bottle. I know that it does have a pretty decent shelf life, but you just don't want that stuff sitting in the bottle. So when you get it in, just dose the entire thing to your tank and you'll be good to go. Now, when it comes, of course, to the phytoplankton, you don't want to be dosing all that. You have to stick to the recommended dosing regimen, depending on if you got the standard or the premium. Just make sure you don't dump the whole bottle, and that's probably not going to do well for your skimmer. Trust me. I've made some mistakes in the past, and one of those was overdosing phytoplankton, and it just was a mess. So don't do that. But when it comes to dosing that phytoplankton, you can either do what I did on the 125 and dose it directly from a refrigerator into your sump. So just dose every single day, or you can spread it out, dose it a couple times during the week or a couple times during the month, just kind of based how much you buy on how big your tank is and how often you plan on dosing. Now, my current dosing schedule is pretty simple. Because I am preparing for a Mandarin Goby, I will be dosing the live foods, the rotifers, as well as the phytoplankton at least once per month to get ready for that fish. Now, once the fish is introduced, I will probably go to every 2 or 3 months for the first year, and then every 6 months after that. Now, it's just because I don't like to do it consistently, because I like to think of it as a treat for the tank. I like seeing the reactions of the fish, even if it is at night and they're not seeing it during the day. They still seem to react to it and have a great time trying to catch all the little critters swimming around the water there. And of course, adding that biodiversity is another key reason behind dosing, and there's nothing better than kind of starting at the bottom of the food chain with the phytoplankton and those smaller pods and brine shrimp, and kind of allowing it to just naturally take its course within your reef tank, so the fish and the coral are healthy just naturally through the process of adding these products. Well, guys, that's about it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I also hope that it gives you guys a little bit more insight on what I do for the 300-gallon reef, especially in preparation for a fish like a Mandarin Goby. Now, if you want any of the products from this video, go to mikesphyto.com and then use the promo code FishOfHex at checkout, and you'll get an additional 10% off your entire order. Now, there is no kickback to me. It's simply a way of saying thank you for supporting the channel and my local hobbyists. So that's about it, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you later. Peace.